Welcome everyone to our last event. Always save the best for last, as it said. Our last events for the Portuguese Beyond Borders Institute, the PBBI Flat Lecture Series at California State University, Fresno. And we are very, very excited with this presentation that we have today. We are very excited because of all of the different events that we've had. And of course, today it is really focused on the Portuguese American experience. And for us, that's always a very special event as well. We have two guests, as all of you can tell here on the screen. We are very, very grateful to their presence. Grateful that they took time from their busy schedule. They're both very, very busy people involved in different aspects of the Portuguese American community, involved academically, of course, with a most amazing resume, as all of you know them. And I know that lots of folks following here on the webinar know these two intellectuals very, very well, and also those following us on social media platforms as well. First, we have Luís Gonçalves, who I've known for a few years, and he specializes. I'm going to read just a little bit from the book because it's the best thing to promote it. And just a little bit, they were very, very gracious in that they only allowed one page for both of them to put their curriculums. And so, but that was probably a good thing, because if it was to put it all in, to write it all out, it would take several pages of the anthology. Luís is specializes in Lusophone cultures and civilizations and their transatlantic dynamic. He holds a PhD in Romance languages with a minor in communication studies and a certification in cultural studies from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. He's organized several conferences and has participated in numerous conferences. We're just talking about that right before we begin. And with several different conferences throughout Portugal, Brazil, Canada, throughout many states in the Union. He has also been the editor for Gavia Brown, a bilingual journal of Portuguese American Letters and Studies. He has published book reviews and articles on several authors. His research includes the diaspora, migrations, migrant communities, in particular from Portugal, Cabo Verde, and of course from Brazil to the United States and Canada. In recognition of the work and the advancement of the Portuguese language in the United States, he's been awarded a prize in 2010, was given to him by the University of the Azores in Portugal and the Portuguese World Language Institute at Lesley University, Cambridge, Massachusetts. He's published widely, and he is, without a doubt, he doesn't like me to say this, but he is the master teacher that I have known in the Portuguese language. I was 22 years a high school teacher. I've been now at the university for 3 years. I was at College of the Sequoias in Visalia as well, as many of you know, here in California. I've been teaching for 3 decades. I've attended many conferences. I've given a few myself once in a while. And Luís is the best of the best. He can motivate teachers like no one I've seen. Welcome, Luís.
Oh, thank you. That's very generous of you.
It's true. It may be generous, but it's true. Carlo Matos is an Azorian American writer who has published various books, and he is has also received grants from the Illinois Arts Council, the Fundação Luso-Americana para o Desenvolvimento FLAD, who sponsors our events at PBBI. And he teaches at city colleges of Chicago, and he is a former fighter. He now trains and coaches cage fighters and kickboxers. And after hours, he can be found entertaining clients at, of course, a different aspect today with the pandemic, I'm sure, at the Chicago Poetry Bordello, and writing poems, of course. And he's published widely and very, very well respected in the Portuguese American world. A unique poet. I have never read a poem by Carlo that I didn't like and that I went back to reread and found something that I missed the first time. And that tells you when a poet is a good poet. Carlo, welcome so much. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Let's talk a little bit about the anthology. That's the reason why we are here, but we'll talk about anything under the sun that anybody would like to bring, because these two can, of course, carry on a conversation on widely different topics. But our main purpose is to talk about this anthology that I have right here. and that some of you, and yes, we all three have it, I hope. And writers of the Portuguese diaspora in the United States and Canada. An anthology. It has an introduction, a preface by the late Jorge Monteiro, who we all miss so much. And I'm just going to read just one little quote from George's preface. And he says, in the wide-ranging and eclectic selection of works in this volume, we see traction in our quest for the genuine literature produced in our shared space by Portuguese immigrants and their descendants. It is our task, our duty, to keep it going. More names, more titles, more anthologies. So let's talk a little bit about the anthology. Luís, how did the process begin? How did the idea come about, first of all?
Well, it first started with the conversations among a group of Portuguese Americans, writers. Carlo is one of them, Millicent was another one, Amy Siri also, and a couple more. Forgive me if I forget any of the names. We participated in a couple of conferences together at the AWP, for instance, in Seattle. And we just, I also organized a panel at the APSA, the American Portuguese Studies Association conference in I believe it was the one in Phoenix or in Santa Fe. Iowa? It was the Iowa one, okay. And it was a panel all completely dedicated to Portuguese American writers. And I also put together a roundtable with 12, I believe there was a really exciting discussion. And in the conversations at the end with the public, we started it really became like, what is this Portuguese American literature? What is it? How do you define it? And Carlo and I afterwards went to dinner with Millicent and a couple of friends, and we sat together at the corner of the table, and we just started talking about that, and how could we come up with a body of work that would exemplify. If we were actually, I believe, if I remember correctly, the conversation started about putting a course together on Portuguese American culture and how would we define a canon for Portuguese American culture. And then all of a sudden it just developed into, well, we could do an anthology. We have a very large number of people writing these days. We kind of not even knowing what we were getting into, just used social media, created a call for papers. It went everywhere. Our friends helped, and in a couple of months we had this going. It was a very spur of the moment, but I think it was also very necessary.
Indeed. And so, Carlo, this conversation, and that's usually the best way to start a project, of course, is over dinner. That's a good way, and in any culture, but especially in the Portuguese culture. How did your recollection of the need for an anthology? Because as Professor Jorge Monteiro, the late and saudoso Jorge Monteiro, writes in the preface, and he talks about some prior anthologies that exist in the Portuguese American world. Yours incorporated the United States and Canada, and as he says, we always need more names, more titles, more anthology, more participation, more writers. So tell us a little bit about your recollection.
Yeah, agreed. Luís got it pretty right about the origins of this thing. I do remember that Millicent and I were talking about doing an anthology just of Kale Soup for the Soul writers, which is a loose agglomeration of different writers. And then we were like, well, is that big enough? I don't know if that's, why stop there? And I think that's where it grew into a bigger project that Luís and I would then undertake. And I remember talking to George at Brown. I sat next to him. We did a reading there of Kale Soup for the Soul, me and Millicent and Paula Neves and Nancy Vieira Couto and Amy Sarah Baptista. I think that was everybody. If I'm forgetting somebody, my apologies. we did a reading there, and I remember talking to George about anthologies, because I believe at that time, either Gavia Brown, the book of Portuguese American poetry, had either just come out or is about to come out. It was like right around that time. And, there was just, there was just the two anthologies. There was Mosier's anthology, and then there was the Gavia Brown. And we're like, okay, we got two. We need more than two. Two is not going to do it. And George and I kind of bonded over talking about that. We also had a friend in common, the late Peter Griffin, Hemingway scholar, who was a great friend of George's and former student, who I knew growing up because he taught at BCC, Bristol Community College. So we really kind of bonded over there, and I believe that's where the origin of asking him to do the preface for our project, where it began, because I've always had the notion that Portuguese American, Portuguese Canadian means a lot more than it's allowed to mean sometimes, right? And so this conversation I'm still having, right? I had this conversation in 2019 in Lisbon with Christopher Larcoche, the late Christopher Larcoche, my great friend. Same conversation, we're still having it, and over many dinners in Lisbon, hashing out this same discussion that we're still having many years later.
Yeah, one of the main things that was really important to us was we really wanted to use social media to reach people that we usually don't see, or to tell our community that there is here, our literary community, that there is here a space for you. So we have some people in this anthology that is the first time that they've published, next to people that have well-established names on the mainstream, not only the Portuguese American literature, but of American literature. And that was extremely important to us, to have a wide range of experience representing the entire English-speaking North America, although that's not even a term that I would use to characterize the United States in Canada, because it's a multilingual space. But we really wanted to be as representative, and as we wanted a collection that was as complex as possible, because our experiences are very complex.
Indeed, and sometimes only in an anthology can you put that forth, because it is not easy to do that, and although, as Carlos said, there's been other things, and as I mentioned as well, and you, Luís, there's been other anthologies, not many, that have been published. When you do a course on Portuguese American culture, or Portuguese American experience, or the Portuguese diaspora experience, to put it a little bit more widely, in North America, you kind of have to go search here and there and everywhere else. And the anthology gives you a body of works that, as you said, has these established figures, but also has others who hadn't had the courage or the opportunity to publish. How did you said you put this call out in social media and other different platforms? Was it hard getting the writers and poets to submit their work, or how did that come about?
It was not hard at all.
Okay. Yeah, I saw Carlo going now. So yeah.
No, we started to have these exciting conversations and emails from people all over this space, with a very eclectic collection of very different writing styles, perspectives, generations, in Portuguese and in English. Some people, actually, what we have from them are translations. There's a lot of Portuguese Americans and Portuguese Canadians producing very interesting literature that we need to know.
Yeah, my experience was that it was not at all hard, and that we had more than we could use. We tried to be as inclusive as possible, obviously, right? But it wasn't like, we should just take everything. There was no taking everything, because
it was
so much.
It was too much.
Yeah, we just got overwhelmed.
So the selection process, let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, like you said, it was too much.
So painful.
Okay. Tell us a little bit, without telling your secrets, but how was the selection process? Because you did have a lot of submissions.
yes, no, and maybe.
Yes, no, and maybe. Okay.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I remember going through, and I think we each did a pass on our own, right? We did
Right.
a pass, and we basically broke it down into things we definitely wanted in there, things we were sure we maybe didn't want in there, and then this kind of maybe pile, which we were kind of like, well, we'll see how much room we have, and then we'll come back to the maybe pile. And that's how I remember it. That's, I think, how we did it, right, Emma?
Right. And it was also like, is this author adding something to the anthology that is not there already? Is this author representing a part of the Portuguese American and Portuguese Canadian experience that is not there already? And so it was painful. There was some cuts that it was, I'm gonna be honest, I'll never be sure if they were the right decision or not, but we had to make a decision.
Indeed. And one of the things that anthology has is, as you said, a variety of voices. So for those who are following us and don't know the anthology, first of all, you can get it anywhere. You can get it wherever you buy your books. It's still available, correct?
Right.
I know that because I ordered it for a friend as a gift not too long ago from the almighty Amazon. But I mean, that's kind of the easiest way to get things. And so,
but it's also in wider distribution in libraries, in bookstores.
In bookstores. So yeah, you can get it so at your local bookstore or wherever you get it online nowadays. So for those of you who haven't heard of the anthology, please grab it, because it does give you an overall view of different perspectives of the Portuguese American and the Portuguese Canadian experience. And it gives us an overall view, and I'd like you to comment on that, from also different geographical areas, because sometimes we have it in our Portuguese American world, and I'm sure that I know a little bit about our friends in Canada, but I'm thinking it's the same. You know, you look at the Portuguese diaspora in the U.S. and Canada, and you think Fall River, New Bedford, New Jersey, New York, California, the Bay Area, maybe, and maybe a few other areas or throughout. And the same thing, you look at Toronto and, maybe Vancouver. But this has a wide variety from different latitudes, from different geographies within the United States and Canada. And sometimes we forget that those experiences go beyond what I'm going to call, and I know it's not going to be politically correct, but I'll use it anyway, the typical kind of ghetto that doesn't exist. But I mean, in some ways it might, but the typical Portuguese towns, so it goes outside those experiences, correct?
Correct, because that works if you only look at the first generation, which usually goes and tries to establish themselves where there is already a community, and that's fair. That's what most communities do. But in this book, we have second, third, and fourth generations. When you start to look at the second generation, third, and fourth, they are all over the place. There's no part of the United States that they don't occupy. So a lot of times, and we do have one or two cases of writers that are maybe the only or one of two or three Portuguese Americans there. And but they are connecting through writing to their heritage. A lot of them are searching for it. A lot of them went through the process, particularly in the 70s, 60s, and 80s, even, of the first generation wanting the second generation to really blend and adapt and start climbing the social strata of the United States of America. And for that, they have to Americanize their kids. A lot of them did not teach the Portuguese language to their kids. And you see the second and third generation trying to recover that heritage that somehow they lost or was denied to them. And they are everywhere, and they are from in all social strata of the United States. Actually, I would say that the Portuguese diaspora generationally has done pretty well, both in the United States and Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for instance, particularly Amy Sayre Baptista's poems, for instance, she published a series of poems called The Fisherman's Daughter's Poems, and these are some of my all-time favorites. Yes. And I mean, these are poems that have that same Southern Gothic voice that is often assigned to people like Faulkner, you know what I mean? Like, as if he owns that kind of voice. And yet it is still, in my mind, every bit as much Portuguese American as, you know, me growing up in Fall River and Millicent in New Bedford, etc. Right? So those poems for me are kind of a bulwark. They're kind of like they're a node for me for wanting to explore voices like that, the Portulachans, as I had never even heard that term before until I spoke to Amy about it. These are the kinds of things we're looking for. And of course, we still do want that first generation writing. There isn't enough of it, right? I often start workshops like, no more grandma poems, no more poems about Vauveau. And then I say, okay, we're gonna write a lot of poems about Vauveau, because yes, we've written a lot of Vauveau poems, but there aren't enough Vauveau poems either, right? It's like simultaneously both of those things, right? So it's that kind of thing where we want to continue to build the bedrock of the writing that has the food and that has the Azores and trips to Lisbon and all of those nodes, that saudades and fado and all of those things, right? That are important, but that also are blending now, mutating, transforming into other things that are just as much Portuguese American as anything else. You know, cultural erasure is one of my big things, and that's one of the. I feel like we've been here long enough. Why do we not exist in, you know, in any real? Why don't we have a presence in pop culture, in etc. Right? We're there. Once you do a little work, they're there, right? How many of them have Vauveaus? You know, Keanu Reeves, I'm looking at you, right? You know, so many of them with the ancestry that draws back to the Azores or Portugal or whatever, what have you. And they're all, you know, it's all quiet. And that troubles me. That's burdensome also on us, because we don't see ourselves.
Yeah, we do have a few that are very vocal, like Meredith Vieira, but they're not enough. They're not enough.
Yeah.
Indeed. And when we look at literature, and Luís and you also, Carlo, mentioned a little bit about these images and these concepts and these experiences that come together to allow, of course, the person to create. What does define Portuguese American literature as you were putting forth this anthology? Are there some key factors that you look for when you're talking about a second or third or even fourth generation, as you mentioned, that are writing? And are there some key concepts that you look for in your mind that you looked when you were establishing, when you're putting together the anthology, and then in your mind you look for as well as key elements that define this Portuguese American experience beyond the Vauveau poem, beyond the first generation, that sometimes, and I can speak of that myself, being first generation, that sometimes dwells a little bit too long on saudades, or in a Portugal or in the Azores, especially when you talk about the archipelago. And although Luís not from there, he's actually from there because he knows it well, just like all of us do. Luís is kind of an honorary Azorean, and
I'm planning to retire in San Miguel.
Okay, well, nice. That's the second best time, but that's okay.
Nice.
And
I love it. I love it.
but it's the typical bairrismo between Terceira and São Miguel, as you know. But and sometimes, you know, the first generation does, you know, construct this image of a land that no longer is, or, you know, sometimes a little bit too much on the saudade. But what key elements do you look for, or are there in one way or another? Because or are these essentially, I know I've gone a couple different directions, but are these essentially American writers with the Portuguese flair to it?
Well, Denise, you have to go in a couple of directions. There's no other way around it. Because we pretty much let the authors identify themselves as Portuguese Americans. We didn't impose any particular definition on them. If they believe that they are Portuguese Canadian and Portuguese American, we were here to read them, honestly. And I'm not sure, I'm going to let Carlo talk about that. I'm not sure if I can tell you if there's like undergoing theme. There is, obviously, but for instance, preparing for today, I was just talking to Carlo a little bit ago. I went and read it again because, you know, it has been 6 years and I'm now very old. I can't maintain my memory the way I was. But I went and it was very interesting to me that completely different texts of the anthology spoke to me, because I'm in a different moment in my life. My daughter is 8 now. She was only 2. There's my mother is ailing in her health. So there's like a text by Eduardo Betancourt Pinto that really spoke to me, right? The title is the mother of my life, which is also in translation. I love the work by Diana Ramos Firestone. I'm sorry, Portuguese escaped me there because the Ramos. Immigration Tuesday at the Masonic Center, and as I'm going through the process of getting my American citizenship, it spoke to me in a different way that it hadn't spoke before. So it's really there's enough diversity here. There's in terms of generation and theme, and that different parts of it will speak to you at different periods of your life. Right. But I am a Portuguese American, and I can recognize myself in every single one of these texts at some point in my life.
Yeah, I mean, when Denise, because you've done plenty of anthologies, right? When you're doing an anthology and you're trying to build a coherence, when you're trying to create a new constellation, right? It's like, as you're building, you're also excluding tons of stuff, right? And it's always, doing an anthology is always a little bit of a betrayal. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how else to say it. And so there was that feeling. And as we tried to be incredibly inclusive, and I do think that our guiding ethos was self-identification, right? You identify, welcome aboard. You know what I mean? And that was super important to us. And that was also true stylistically and aesthetically. It wasn't just poems. It wasn't even just quote unquote literature, right? We had all kinds of different things. So for me, I don't know if Luís agrees with me, but for me, I don't think there is, these are the things that are Portuguese themes and these other things are not. I mean, even I reread your piece, Denise, and it really moved me. Denise published My Azorean American Journey in the anthology, and you said in it, at 10, I didn't comprehend what it was like to live a complete life on the hyphen. It's that thing about that completeness that struck me, that's what it is. It's like always searching for that completeness, because the other piece that would make us complete that's the Portuguese part. And what is that? You know what I mean? Is that the Azores that my parents left behind, it doesn't exist anymore, right? Is it me going to the Azores as a kid a bunch of times? Is it, favas and carnizada? Yes, it is all of those things. I mean, I'm okay. Like, I think of Frank Gaspar's Black Notebook poems from late Rapturous, and those for me are every bit as much Portuguese American poems as anything else. I mean, they're Miltonian. I mean, they're interliterary, they're dense, and yeah, they're not just written by a Portuguese American dude. They are Portuguese American poems. If other groups can lay claim to their experience, whatever it is, and that counts, then I don't see why we shouldn't be able to as well.
On the other hand, we have something that you would expect, I guess. Catherine Vaz was very, very generous in submitting a piece by her late father, August Mark Vaz. And it's cooking with a Portuguese flair. And we have a couple of recipes here that could not be more Portuguese or Portuguese American.
That's right.
So you go in both directions. The most surprising and maybe the most expected.
Indeed, and before we continue, we have on the webinar quite a few participants who are in the anthology. So if any of them would like to jump in, I'll be more than happy to make you a co-host, and that way you can be part of it. And I'm thinking about when you were talking about those elements, Carlo, I'm thinking about Sam Preda, which is one of my favorite poets as well. And Sam, it's. I read Sam's poetry like many people do who follow him on Facebook. well, I do at 5 in the morning when I wake up, and that's, I know that's an ungodly hour for anyone of Portuguese background. But when you come to a rural area, and you live in a rural area, you kind of acquire some of those early riser a trajectory that had me get up early in the morning to help my father, and so it stayed with me. And Sam is so generous because he writes a poem and he'll put it on his social media, on his Facebook page, and it's kind of, some days there isn't one, very rarely, but some days there are a few days, and I go look for it, as I'm having my first cup of coffee. And some of the poems are about a variety of different themes that Sam writes about, but there's always something I find in there that has a Portuguese connection. And we're talking about third generation. We're talking about, his grandparents were the ones that immigrated at a very young age. So there is something, as you mentioned, Carlo, that it doesn't have to be in a specific theme. It's there, whether the poem is concentrating on a Portuguese particular theme, when it's talking about, as a piece of food, or it's talking about, something that grandma used to say that, has been in an important part of your life, or if you're dealing with something that has to do with social justice or racial equality, there is some Portugueseness that you can find in that writing.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why when you do an anthology, or when you do a full manuscript, right, if you're writing a book where you can do those things, that becomes even more powerful. Like you can have a poem that's incredibly searching for your roots, kind of. I'm looking at Edward Anderson's question.
Yeah, I was going to ask that question. Yeah. So.
Like looking for your roots, like straight facing it, like, what is this? Where do I come from? Who are my people? All that kind of thing. And then that can be next door to something that is more like Frank's Late Rapturous. And then it'll all hopefully cast a pallor over it, so that it maintains both of those, that tricky dance. I think the anthology went in both directions kind of at the same time. It was like, let's get those in there, those kind of fundamental first gen stuff, so that people who are like, what's a Portuguese American or what's a Portuguese Canadian, will have something to hold on to, stuff that's different from some other ethnic experience, or from the mainstream American experience, whatever the hell it is that is. And then stuff that shows that, okay, this is a foundation, but we are able to do whatever. Because, I grew up in Fall River, and all I knew of Portuguese and Portuguese people was what I heard from my parents, uneducated people. I can't read Portuguese that well. My Portuguese is pretty terrible. So I couldn't go search out those things, history. All I could find was like Richard Zenith translations of Pessoa, right? There was so little. I mean, most of my history of Portugal is made up. I made it up. It's like fantasy. Hopefully I've fixed that as I've grown up, but certainly
why would you fix that?
Well, yeah. Well, if you read my first book, which is my most Portuguese-y book, right? Most of the history in there is, I made it up. Now, no one who isn't an insider is going to know that, which is what I love about it. But most of it is fantasy, because I didn't have anything real to put in its place. Mostly because of my ignorance, but nonetheless.
But on the other hand, even without knowing, there are things that you are a subject position. You and your subject position was created by your history, by what was brought down to you. And you might not even know, but you do things from that subject position.
Right. Exactly.
And from your Portuguese heritage, even if it has been, it reminds me, I was correcting an essay by one of my students in Portuguese, and she told me that she has two brothers. One of them has autism, profound, and there are certain things that a family does, like they don't ever go out for lunch at the same time. How part of the family will go to another part of the family will go, because somebody has to stay with him, or he has to be with a group, but somebody has to be at home at the same time. And only when she got to high school, she realized that other families didn't do that. And it's the same thing with this is a family example, but it's the same thing with culture. There's a lot of things that we do in our families, in our group of friends, and we don't even realize that other people in the United States might not do it. It's by not, maybe not everybody is eating bacalhau and you're still doing it on Christmas.
That's right.
Where's your turkey?
We don't do turkey either, but indeed. And Carlos kind of touched upon Scott's question, and I would like to read it to everyone, which is he comments on the Professor Francisco Cota Fagundes, which all of us know, presented a new classification strata for Luso migrants and Luso ethnic literature in North America, which is divided Portuguese North American literature in the following manner. So he has the pre-Capelinhos. For those following us on social media, it's the volcano in the islands of the Azores and in the island of Fayal that then, of course, had the Azorean Refugee Act. And then from that, of course, the Family Reunification Act and the 1965 Act, that 64-65 Act that brought lots of Azoreans, that last wave of immigration from the Azores, mainland Portugal, Madeira, etc. Post-Capelinhos, then he has the melting pot and post-melting pot, as in Discover Your Roots. So being of the Discover Your Roots group myself, I'm curious to what you think of those of us discovering our roots late in life can connect more deeply to those roots. So obviously through literature, as Scott is doing, and as others are doing, because it is interesting. I read, of course, Scott Edward Anderson's poems, and I like him dearly as well. And sometimes he looks at for me, reading a second and third generation author is very important because they give me a perspective of being Portuguese that I never thought about, because I'm an immigrant. So I think this way, and then, or they kind of legitimize, okay, the way I'm thinking, because they're thinking the same way, and they're second, third, or fourth generation. They have those same thoughts and everything. So it does both to me. It surprises me in one aspect, and in another aspect, it legitimizes, hey, this that I am Portuguese is not just because I'm an immigrant. It is there even in the second and third generations.
It stays with you.
So comment on that, both of you, what your thoughts on it. And Luís.
Okay, well, okay. I know Scott, I'm not sure you're gonna like my answer because I'm a language teacher. So the first thing I think is important is to get closer to the language. I'm not saying that you have to be fluent, but if you want to connect to your roots, I do think that there is value in understanding how Portuguese in Portugal and the Azores and in Madeira, and even in the diaspora, in the family setting, how do they express their feelings and who they are in their own words. Another aspect that I think is extremely important is to reconnect to your family history. It's to reconnect to your pictures, to the home movies. Try to look for what's the trajectory that created you? How did you come to be in this space at this time? But that's kind of an inner voyage, an inner search. Okay, then connect to others, and you are going to start to identify patterns, like Denise identifies in your writing, and you are going to start to realize that there is something specific to you, but also universal in terms of the Portuguese American experience is a human experience, like so many others in the world. I don't know if Carlo has another comment.
Well, what I'd say is I would have killed when I was growing up to have what we have now. Like, I almost wish I was a kid now. Because I felt like I grew up in the great void, you know what I mean? Like, I literally grew up 25 minutes down from UMass Dartmouth, and I had no idea they were there. I mean, not the school, I mean.
Carlo, let me just interject a second.
Okay, interject away.
Also at that time in that void, there were others portraying us. And yes. Can you talk to, because I know I think it's important. Can you talk to that? Can you talk to the way you saw Portuguese portrayed when you were growing up?
Okay.
By
Yeah.
others.
Sure. Yeah. That is exactly right. So I've got nothing authentic to hold on to, right? And then I've got these trying to keep my language in control here.
I'll use it. Use it.
Baloney. How's that? We got these.
That's very generous of you.
Got these kind of baloney representations of us. I mean, the classic example, and I think this is why Luís brought this up, is I delivered this paper a number of times on Mystic Pizza, that movie from the 80s, right? It's foggy now, but Mystic Pizza, it claims to be about a Portuguese community and a Portuguese pizza shop. Now, of course, the real Mystic Pizza is there. It's Connecticut, right? It's in Connecticut. It's really there, but of course, it's Greek owned.
Yeah, it's Greek.
My favorite, and me and a bunch of friends were cracking about this the other day. Like, we always laugh about the secret sauce recipe from the Algarve. Like, that always kills us. On the other hand, I would have loved for that to have been true. See, that's the irony there, right? Is that it's ridiculous. And yet when I searched it, I was sad when I found that, even though I didn't like the movie, I was sad that Mystic Pizza was owned by Greeks, not by Portuguese, that there is no secret recipe from the Algarve of pizza sauce, and I mean, all they got right really was the working classness of it. If you grew up in Fall River or New Bedford, like East Coast, Newark, right, you can recognize plenty of yourself in its working class elements. And that's the only thing I said they got right. The rest of it was, there was nothing Portuguese about it. It was Portuguese light. And then, if you're a kid who's got a slight literary bent, right, you read, Steinbeck, and then you get to Tortilla Flats, and you're like, me and Steinbeck are going to have something to say, or you get Melville, right? What was it? Billy Budd, was that the one? I forget now. Even not too long ago, with that chef everybody likes, Anthony Bourdain. I know he died, and he's beloved, but I got to tell you, I was not a huge fan, but I did watch the show every now and again. When he went to the Azores, I turned it off after about 10 minutes. He was so condescending, and he's somebody who should know better, right? Because he grew up around Portuguese in Boston, right? So it's that kind of thing. Even not too long ago in the New Yorker, I think it was the New Yorker, an article about the Azores, and it was like, it's so quaint, and it was like pat you on the head, and that maddening, patronizing WASP attitude. This is the kind of nonsense that you would grow up with, and we have nothing much to counter. We have nothing to put in its place to deal with that, to combat it. Because even, I talk to my students, I teach at an incredibly diverse school. Truman is like ridiculous. When they say diverse, it's one of the few places that means it. Okay, so my students are from everywhere. Okay, I talk to my students and I say, do you have representations of you in the culture? And a lot of them will say yes, but they're negative. And I'm like, you're right, that stinks, and we need to correct those. However, you're still there. We're not even there in that way. You know what I mean? It's three or four patronizing comments and nada. Zero. So
indeed, and that's why the anthology is important, because and that's why we need to get it into more hands, because we, and in the Portuguese American community, whether it be the traditional community, as we kind of spoke a little bit, and Luís mentioned, or the second and third generation that springs onto newer areas that we don't associate with the Portuguese American presence. I mean, you're in Chicago, and there's the Portuguese in South Carolina and North Carolina, and of course there's now a bigger community in Florida, but throughout the South there's people in Atlanta and Texas, a growing community, a very growing community in Arizona.
Florida.
Yes, indeed, and Idaho, Iowa, Missouri. So we're just about in every state of the union, obviously. And how do we get this anthology and other works like this anthology into the hands of folks, whether they are Portuguese or not Portuguese? Because that's sometimes sometimes we kind of preach to the choir. And I recall Luís talking about this as far as language teachers at a conference that I attended, as when he was talking to us about some things that needed to change. And he said, I know I'm kind of just preaching to the choir, which is true. We kind of do that once in a while. We'll just preach to one another. And the group following us, of course, here on the webinar. But how do we go beyond the traditional community, and how do we go to all of the Portuguese Americans independently of where they live, and what can we do, and what can also Portugal, and I'm going to ask, especially Luís knows Portugal really well, I know you do too, Carlo, how can Portugal be a little bit more of a presence in this? In other words, how can they help us? Not determine policy, okay, but how can they help us? And I mean us, I mean all of us in the Portuguese American community, but those like yourselves that are creators, that are trying to abolish these stereotypes and these negative images that may be out there because of a Mr. Pizza or many other things that are out there, or the 2 or 3 words, as you said, that were patronizing in an article in this or that magazine. And so here with an anthology like this, we have an amalgam of works that talk about the uniqueness of the diaspora in the United States and in Canada from different perspectives, from an immigrant perspective, from the hyphen perspective, to those who don't know what the heck a hyphen is, but still identify with the Portuguese, from their ancestors. And works like this, that is one of the things, and I'm kind of in a soapbox, so forgive me, but works like this to me are very, very important. Not because I'm in there, I shouldn't even be in there, but because everybody else that's in there, okay? And yet sometimes they don't have the distribution that they need to have, and Portugal doesn't understand because it wasn't baptized by A, B, or C in Portugal, and so it doesn't get to where it needs to go. Or as we'd like it to go. I'm sure that you had good distribution, but I'm sure you'd like to get it into a few more thousand people's hands. And so how do we do that? First of all, do you have any ideas? I know both of you have been working with us for a while. And second of all, and we, of course, with your Boavista Press, and second of all, what role does Portugal play in helping us reach more and more Americans and Canadians of Portuguese ancestry without telling us what to do?
Well, I'm going to start right there. My press didn't exist. And the only reason why this press exists is because we weren't able to get this manuscript accepted anywhere. And even, how do I say this? Even institutions that cater to the Portuguese American community could not see value in it. And I just could not understand that. So what Portugal needs to do is to see where are they really putting their money, because they are investing money. I understand that the government is investing money, and what is the return that they are getting for that money. And if they are not getting enough return, ask the community. This is, to me, the anthology is extremely important because we have to write ourselves. We cannot leave it for other people to write us. And we have people in Canada, I'm just going to open it over here. After Irene Marques is having an absolutely phenomenal career. She's coming, I believe, with a book last year that was won an award in Portugal, and is actually being printed and sent out by the Portuguese government, I believe so. And she's coming up with a new one. Okay, so we have Diana Ramos Firestone came up with something phenomenal. I'm probably gonna forget somebody, but Lara Goulart. We need to put her works into a book because she has so much published in journals all over the place. Denise, but we need more. I believe a lot of her work is in different publications. Marina Carreira, she is extraordinary.
Very powerful. I didn't know Marina until I read her here, and then I saw a couple of her things. That's
Whoa,
very powerful. Yeah.
Wow.
Very
Millicent Borges Accardi, Nancy Vieira Couto.
Millicent and Nancy are icons, of course.
Of course. Paula Neves, all these people have been writing. They need a house that publishes them constantly. They need, there's too many no's in the mainstream of the United States. And if we want to get to the mainstream, we have to at least be published. If these things stay in the drawer and never get out of the drawer, that it's just not going to work. So create space. If the American publishing houses don't publish them, Portugal could do it, and it's not very expensive. Sure. It's not very expensive. I'll be honest with you, I lose a lot of money with this press every year, but I do it out of a sense of mission. And because both Portuguese Americans and Portuguese Canadians and people working with the teaching of Portuguese in the United States don't have a publisher that readily opens the doors and let us in. So we just have to circumvent them and create our own devices. There's no other way around.
Yeah.
So there's more than just this, okay? Besides the anthology, all these people have worked in the last 6 years, and there is a good body of work out there.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's out there. It's just not under the umbrella, you know, that it should be under, right? Mm-hmm. You know, like how many of those writers you just listed have books upon books, right? Like been publishing for 20 years. And yet, you know, when we go out there, our Portuguese stuff, right, gets either shunted because they're like, we don't know what this is, and you have to take it out, or they're like, oh, that's interesting, but it's not a part of why they're selling your work. Like, for example, my new book is like that. Like, there's plenty of Portuguese American stuff in there, but my publisher, and I'm not dissing on my publisher, he's awesome, but he's not interested in that. He's got other things that he's interested in. And that's just like ancillary, you know, which is fine, right? But it would be nice if there was, more than one house, right, that cared. And I don't know. I mean, is it a language issue? Is that all it is? Is that what's stopping the transatlantic, you know, connection? Why there aren't works going that way and this way? I know some do, a little bit over here, a little bit over there, but this should be a highway.
Yeah, there needs to be a little bit more investment. And this is, again, I'm editorializing, but I guess I have the right to editorialize once in a while. And that is, needs to be a little bit more connection to what is being produced by Portuguese Americans and Portuguese Canadians, or by Canadians and Americans of Portuguese ancestry, that needs to reach more of Portugal. Sometimes Portugal can be a little bit elitist and just look at the names that, you know, are and of course those need to be known in Portugal. If you get a Nobel, or if you get, you know, some kind of a Pulitzer, exactly, you know, any of those prizes. But as far as, like Luís said, the only people that are going to write our story, we need to write our story, because we've been waiting for a while for others to write it, and they either haven't done a very good job, as Carlo mentioned. And so we need to write our story, and Portugal needs to understand that this is our story.
And theirs.
It's their story, yeah.
And it's their story, correct. Yeah.
You cannot tell the story of Portugal without us.
That's so true, so true. And so, and my point also is getting it into folks, you know, because Luís, as you mentioned, you've lost, you know, some money in this. I'm sure you have.
It's okay.
But the how do we get it into more homes? How do we get it into more schools? How do we get it into more libraries? And that's where I think that Portugal has can help tremendously, because, as Luís says, it doesn't cost a lot of money, but with the proper channels and with the proper tools, we could take writers of the Portuguese diaspora in the US and Canada, and we could easily make it available to a few more thousand people, whether it be with a distribution to every single library, whether Portugal buys, for example, I'm talking about the Portuguese government buys a certain amount of copies, and distributed them to all of the different libraries, even the libraries where there's Portuguese communities.
Right.
If they would buy 200 copies to send out to towns and cities, there's more than 200, but at least 200 to 300 where there's Portuguese American communities. That would be one way to get 300 copies or 400 copies out there, to the Portuguese American organizations that have libraries, because a lot of them don't have the funds, to Portuguese language schools, to schools that teach Portuguese, because although the works are in English, but it can be used in a different manner. So to colleges and universities that are going to invest in a book for their library, but there's a way to do it. And then, of course, also investing in promoting by taking, and here's a suggestion for the Portuguese government. They didn't pay me for it. They can use it. And by taking Luís and Carlo and whoever organizes any future works like this, but by taking Luís and Carlo and doing a tour throughout, because that is still a way to sell books, not in the pandemic, but that is the way to sell books pre-pandemic. That is the way to sell books post. And taking both of you and doing a tour, through 10 or 15 cities in the United States, that with talks and maybe
inviting the writers that are here,
and I was going to say that's my third thing, and inviting these writers in the different regions to participate and everything else. So that's where Portugal can do. Portugal can be looking at what Boavista Press, or we just launched one at Fresno State, Bruma Press, hopefully to help, in the West Coast of the United States, and to be a little bit more inclusive. Or other Gavia Brown or Tegas Press or anybody else that is in the publishing world, by taking these works that are being published and helping the distribution and helping organize events that bring forth these writings to more and more people. So that is one way that we certainly can do it. There was a question: how can one obtain this latest anthology? That's from Anthony. Anthony is on this.
Yes, Anthony is part of it.
Anthony's
the fastest way is Amazon, undoubtedly.
Right. Yeah. The best way now. Okay, so we are almost out of time, but I wanted to ask you a couple more questions. And first of all, is there a project for a second edition in the future?
We've talked
an updated with other because it's been 6 years. I know that you can publish a new anthology every 6 or 7 years, but why not every 8 or 9?
We've talked about it. It's not a plan yet, but who knows? If I could add something to what you just said, though, Denise, our colleagues in academia could really do some good work for us. Would be to create a study guide based on this anthology that could be used in community schools with our kids, with our seniors that want to read more, or any community college or university anywhere. That it could be used as a learning device. That would be great.
We need to get some funding to put together an event. I'm very serious to get a project put forth to where we get a few of our colleagues that well, Luís, to put together such a study guide, because that is very important. I agree with you. That's a wonderful idea.
So Carlo, what do you think? Another one?
I know we've talked about it a couple times. Oh my God, it's so much work.
It is a lot of work, but there's a lot.
Might be right, though. It might be time.
There's a lot of newer voices just at Fresno State now on June the 3rd. And here's a plug for Sam. I think he's still on. Sam is going to be reading from his latest book, True North and Untrue You, which is a wonderful book. And along with Sam, the Master of Fine Arts program, the MFA program at Fresno State, is putting forth 2 Portuguese American young ladies who are just, one of them in her 3rd year of the MFA, the other one just beginning. And one of them writes fiction, one of them writes nonfiction. And both of Portuguese background. We just discovered, we didn't know, and I can tell you, for some of the things I've read, they're excellent. They're just really good. And so I think there is a lot of young people there in their early 20s. There's a lot of young people out there that are writing and sometimes don't have a place to publish, or don't have a publisher, or don't have enough, or they're just writing, just beginning. And it'd be wonderful to have some of these new writers, and who knows, Luís, maybe we can do a Bruma and Boavista combination.
Absolutely, absolutely. You can count on me. Absolutely. And I just want to let you know that this picture in the cover was taken by me at Ellis Island, which saw around almost 200,000 Portuguese come through. And there is a ring, a metal ring with their names engraved on it, and there is a good number of Gonçalves in there. So I wanna dedicate this to them, to those people that came here waiting, looking for better, and made us who we are today. These are the things that they left behind. There are two objects, a Portuguese saint and a lady from the Azores left behind some Lennon products. I believe is a sheet and a pillow and some. So we are there.
Very interesting. Well, that's a wonderful way to end it. As a paying homage and tributes to those who came before us, because we are all here on someone else's shoulder, whether we like it or not, but we are. And sometimes we forget that, but we are. Carlo, besides, of course, the anthology, what are you working on? Tell us a little bit if you can.
Yeah, I've got a new book coming out. It's called We Prefer the Damned, and it's coming out from Unbound Edition Press in October. So it'll be out soon. Pre-orders will be in September.
Okay.
I'm really excited. It's been 4 years. It's finally done. I saw the mock-up for it. It looks great. Hardcover with a half dust jacket.
Wow.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I'm spoiled.
Yeah, you are. You are.
I can't wait for it to come out. So be on the lookout for that for sure.
So there it is. There's an congratulations, Ian. There's an opportunity to get you all across to the different parts so you can promote it after October.
That's right.
Indeed.
I'm down.
Indeed. And Luís, tell us a little bit about just a few minutes, your great work with the different associations, of course, Association of Portuguese Language Teachers, but also with the less taught
the National Council less commonly taught languages.
Languages. I know you're doing wonderful work there.
Those two are keeping me busy.
You're our Portuguese voice in there constantly.
Yes, we have to be there. Nobody's going to speak up for us. So I preside the American Organization of Teachers of Portuguese, and as the president of that organization, I'm part of the National Council for Less Commonly Taught Languages, and this year and next year I'm presiding the council, which is a way for us and our language teachers to have access to a lot of grants, both in publishing and in research, and maybe the Portuguese government could do a couple of things like that for writers, grants, research, writers, residencies. All this is all very interesting, but I'm concentrating. I finished an online platform for the teaching of Portuguese at Princeton, which I'm very thankful for the grant that we got from the university. We are not using books anymore. We are straight getting real documents using multimedia. And I'm trying to finish a project for the teaching of foreign languages with a focus on Portuguese for teachers. Let's see if I can do that this summer.
Thank you for all your work. Thank you for all of you that you have done, indeed, for the teaching of the Portuguese language in the United States. I don't know where we would be without Luís Gonçalves. So, as we say in Portuguese, que Deus te dê muita saúde por muitos anos.
Or alcohol.
And thanks to all of you who've joined us. It's been fun. It's been fascinating. It's been very informative. If you have not, those of you, especially those of you following us on social media, if you have not acquired a copy of Writers of the Portuguese Diaspora in the United States and Canada, as Luís said, best way now with everything that's going on. Maybe is through Amazon, but once bookstores are open, check your favorite bookstore, or if you have a way to check your favorite bookstore, do that, and the bookstore owner can obviously find a way to get it. So best of luck to both of you. Best of luck on your new book, Carlo. We're looking forward to it. Luís, thank you for all you do, and thanks to all who were joining us. Thanks for all of the excellent comments. Thanks for the nice comments. Thanks to our good friend Manuela Marujo from the now Professor Emeritus. She was too young. I mean, I look at Manuela and I said, Professor Emeritus, what, they let him retire now at 35?
Right.
Because, you know, she looks...
University of Toronto.
University of Toronto. Congratulations to her for, of course, all of her work that she has done for many, many years. Thanks to all the poets, many of them and writers who were part of the anthology. I think we have Nancy was on the anthology. Yeah. We have Millicent. Yes. We have
Anthony Barcelos.
Lotta, Anthony Barcelos, and of course, Sam Pereira. And if I missed anyone, I apologize.
Oh,
and Sam, yes, and thanks to all of you who are joining us, whether it be here in the webinar or on social media. We want to thank those who've been following us all semester long. We had funding for 3 to 4 different conferences per semester. We were able to, of course, this year totally different. We didn't have any funding, but we were able to stretch it out thanks to the participation of people like Luís and Carlo, and we appreciate it very, very much. We must continue to build new and energetic ways to reach our community and to tell our story. So again, thanks to both of you. Thanks to all of you. Take care. Have a good evening. And don't forget, it's called Writers of the Portuguese Diaspora in the United States and Canada. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.